Hello, everyone. Long time no see. Welcome back to Quick Fix Fantasy. I'm one of your hosts, Chris P, and I can't do this alone. I definitely can't do this alone. I am joined, as always, by Dr. Doug. What is up, Dr. Doug?
Hello, I am. It's good to see you as well. I know it's been a little bit of time. I have a new background now. I'm in Oklahoma. Moved from Texas to Oklahoma, so I'm just a bit more north now. But yeah, it's I'm excited to talk about the off season and get back into this.
How's the weather over there compared to Texas? I know Texas has been terrible.
Yes, I'd take this weather like 7 days out of seven. It's just as hot, if not a bit hotter here. Like it's like 103 here yesterday, but it's just not humid. Houston is like 90% humidity at all times. Yeah, I actually went for a run yesterday in like 100-degree heat, and like that's impossible in Houston. It's just too humid. It's like running with like a comforter on your back or something. It's so hot. So I definitely prefer the Stillwater, Oklahoma, like dry heat over Houston, but it is hot here, no doubt about it.
If it makes you feel any better, right outside of Boston, it's like 91 right now, but it could rain at any second, so you can't even breathe outside. It is
Yeah,
miserable, and not to one up you, but I stepped outside a little bit yesterday. I took a walk, and I really took a lot out of me. I was in the mirror flexing. I was like, "Holy shit, I'm skinny now!" Like that one walk just changed my life. I had chicken
weigh
salad
yourself
for
before and
lunch,
after.
no
Yeah,
DoorDash. It was great. I'm getting into summer mode with all of a month and a half left of summer, but.
true, two true physical specimens here, I would say, on this podcast.
I mean that is true. I like to categorize myself as skinny fat, which
Mm.
not many people can do. I mean, it's very tough to even have that body structure. But hey, I figured a way to do it with booze, fast food, and sitting in a chair 12 hours a day.
Not many people can do it like that.
No,
It's impressive.
no, yeah. What are you gonna do? But yeah, the weather's hot. But you were a little hot last year when it came to betting. We were talking about this a little bit before we got involved. Transition look has haven't lost a beat.
Absolutely.
But there's not much going on, off season wise right now besides rosters and stuff, which we will touch on briefly. So make sure you stick around for a little bit, and we will hit on those. But looking back at last year, and your betting that that you were involved in, and all that, the wagers that you put in, and the lineups that you put in. Looking back at it now, what would you do differently? How did you do? Just give me a little snapshot of that.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think like the first thing is like, I mean, so I'll start by saying like, yeah, I started betting much more frequently and like, yeah, like really thinking about it around when the podcast started. So it was like mid-major three, was like, so we'll talk about like how uncertain the early season is, but like I definitely do think that I had an advantage in that I didn't try to dip my toe in major one because things are just crazy at the beginning of the year. But yeah, so I started around major three. In terms of like, so like what was available in Texas is I could play DraftKings and PrizePicks, but I couldn't bet on the games specifically, like yeah, on the money lines of games or like Bet 365 or something like that. So I would say at the beginning I was like splitting my like investment between DraftKings and PrizePicks. As Major Four went on, and then definitely through all of Major Five, I was mostly just playing Prize Picks. I think like the main reason for it was just that like the edges were bigger and like they were easier and lower investment to like achieve those edges. On DraftKings, like even if you are the best person at building lineups, there's a lot of variance. You're competing against a lot of other people, and you have to pick a full team of people. And like it just requires a lot more research up front. And so for me, it was very nice. Like I'm already following the games. The one like downside of DraftKings is that like you have to have everything in before the first game starts, and then it's hands off. And for me, I'm what I want to do every day that there's games like Friday, Saturday, Sunday is like I'm investing the time to watch the games already. If I have to also invest 2 hours ahead of time to think about lineups, that's like, yeah, now I'm taking up a lot more time that I could be spending with my family or whatever. And so to me, I shifted a lot more towards prize picks in the end because I could sort of play them as the games went on. So yeah, I'd say by the end of the year I was playing mostly Prize Picks. In terms of like records, I broke even on DraftKings. I think it mostly just from lack of play. I played mostly cash games, so like head-to-heads, double ups, things like that. And yeah, I'd say I think I was about break even. I didn't actually write down the exact number, but then for Prize Picks, yeah, I have my stats here. I made 74 bets, and I won. 30 of them, which like about 40% win rate, which if you know anything about PrizePicks is definitely really good. My ROI was about 60%. So making some serious change back on like those bets. Yeah, when you're getting triple your money or double your money on these different wagers, you don't need to win every time. I got about 60% of my picks right, which means I should have won about 36, like if they were just completely random, if I got 60% of the picks right, but I need to get two picks in the same slip right, that's about like a 36% win rate. So I was winning a little more than average. Some of that's just correlation, which we can talk about, and then just some of that's probably just good luck picking the right combinations of players on the right slips to hit a couple extra slips here and there. So yeah, no, in general, I mean, 60% ROI is not anything to sneeze at, and I felt like by the end of the season, I was really hitting my stride. Making smart bets, not tilting, not not changing my bets, but also leaning into some uh, inconsistencies that PrizePicks has on later games. And actually, I actually did honestly bet more like mid-game slips than I did at the beginning just because of that. But just like trying to stay very level.
Yeah, I think you've raised good points with it too, and I'm sure we've said this in the past, but it just reminded me again. Betting before, like when it comes to DraftKings, you have to put it in, your 2 hours before, whatever, investing that time. There's so many variables that could make that bet shit, for the lack of better words, right? Like you don't know the map pools yet, and we are in a industry within esports where at any given day, someone could be feeling it, someone could just have their day, and at any given day someone could just shit the sheets and they have like no idea, you're just not feeling it that day, you're not seeing the ball like you should be. And for me personally, I love betting on football, American football, and you kind of know what you're getting before you get involved, right? Like this running back gets X amount of touches, over under whatever. That this quarterback is playing, that they're bubble, like there's not many things that could really change. So you can put those bets in for better odds earlier because there's not many variables that are going to throw it off. But with, esports betting in Call of Duty specifically, you have to kind of wait until the last second just to see, and you don't really have that option when it comes to that. So that's why I personally lean more in the prize pick side of things, because I can watch map one, see how they perform in hardpoint, see that this person's taking over today, because as we've both seen, players can do that in a 4v4, Call of Duty, and then you can play, your map fours or stuff like that. So you get a better sample just from watching map one. So when it comes to that, did you sway in any direction? I know you said you were betting later, but were you more betting on, hard point, control, search, or was it just a healthy mix of everything?
Yeah, I think yeah, you definitely hit on some like really important points there that like yeah, we can gain some information watching map one that can help us, especially maps three and four. Like I think our respawns like tend to correlate a bit stronger. So yeah, I'd say like the main pattern that I would take is wait until after map one to bet map three. I do think that like yeah, we talk about like waiting to see the maps and stuff. I was very surprised and yeah, honestly pleasantly surprised that like the lines definitely move when the maps come out, like and it's very fast, and like I wouldn't even yeah, like I'm focused on it almost 100%, and I'm still not able to get to those lines before they move a lot of the time, which is frustrating, but also it's just good that the market seems fairly efficient in terms of like maps. So it made me feel a little bit better about the fact that like if I didn't hit those, like I could just walk away from like a pick or something. But yeah, so a typical like pattern for me would be to watch map one, see if I could try to get a feel on how the series is going to play with some map three bets already in mind, because the maps have already been announced. So there's not going to be any more movement potentially in the lines for map three, and then make my map three under bets. I mean, I'd said on the podcast before, like I'm pretty much, I would say like more than 50% of all of my prize picks were under controls. Just the way the control plays, where when it does go round five, almost all the players hit their overs, but almost all the rest of the time they will hit their unders, especially when you lose. And like that is just like not the is basically like the average outcome and the outcome that will happen 50% of the time are not the same. And so yeah, like I was betting a lot of map three unders. I'd say the other interesting phenomenon that I observed later in the season that some other people on Twitter pointed out is that like because map 4 only grades if it gets played. Otherwise, they'll just give you your money back. You can put in some bets on map 4 earlier in the series, and that if it goes to a 3-0, the map won't get played. And so, like, we see this effect where when map 4 does get played, the team that lost map 1 is more likely to win map 4, because just like if they lost map 1 but they didn't get 3-0'd, we're playing map 4, that means they must have done something. And you can get those bets in before games 2 and 3 get played, and like maybe it looks like it's more clear what's going to happen in the series. And so yeah, you see this effect where like teams that lose map 1 win map 4 more. And so yeah, I had some success finding some spots where guys that like had bad map 1s, and it's like, okay, well, if they are able to win one of the next 2 games, I actually like that guy to go over the next time around, because it's, I mean, the effect is probably compounded by the fact that like if you picked map 1, like that's your pick, that means that map 4 won't be your team's pick, or the opposite, like you start on the bad side of map 1 and you lost, but now you're going to start on the good side for map 4. So like there are a lot of like things that go into how map 4s play. And yeah, we saw this year, like I think I retweeted if somebody wanted to go back and look, but yeah, like map 4 records are pretty impressive. The team that loses map 1 wins map 4 a lot more than 50% of the time. So yeah, that would seem to be a pretty, and so like this all works because I should go back and say like PrizePicks lists the same lines for map 1 and map 4 like 99% of the time. So like yeah, if a player is over 22 and a half map 1, they're going to be over 22 and a half map 4, regardless of what happens in map 1, regardless of if I guess with the exception of like, yeah, if the maps themselves when they come out shift those lines. So like, yeah, you're basically getting some free information that PrizePicks really isn't considering, which is which team picked map 1. They just care about what the map is.
Yeah, it's good to know too that the lines aren't really moving from map 1 to map 4, because like I said at the beginning, right? You see how they're coming out, and you see how they're playing that day. You see who's sticky, who's not, like who's taking the most gunfights, where they're playing, stuff like that. If their gameplay or their strategy has changed. So it's good to know that map 1 and map 4 have similarities when it comes to the actual lines, because it's free information that you won't get if you're betting on map 1 without seeing anything. But that is a lot of being kept in the dark and not really knowing what's to come. But it's kind of like us in the off season, right? Talking about teams to look forward to next year. I want to dive into a little off season, looking forward. Who looks juicy when we really don't know just yet. It's a different game. We have different rosters. It's going to play differently. We have no idea what's going to go on. So it's kind of take this with a grain of salt. But you can more times than not, you can attach performance to certain players. No pun intended with attach. But off season for you, is there anyone that's jumping off the paper to you before we kind of jump into the teams that are confirmed?
Um, I don't know if there's any specific players that I think are like bound to perform. I guess maybe like a good example, and this is just a speculative roster, but like one that has been whatever confirmed as at least potential, is like with Hunter T's new roster with Joe Deceives. Like, I mean, I think a lot of people knew that Joe is like really talented, and so to see him on like potentially a bigger name roster next year, and also playing with like some slower players. And so like we have Ghosty and like again, this is all just like speculative on their roster, but like Ghosty and Cammy as the ARs on that team, like playing fairly slow. Afro is not an overly speedy sub either. Like I just think that that spot for Joe seems like it's like if he really is gross, like this is going to be the spot to do like to show it. And so like last year I think that he didn't really have that opportunity to show like insane gun skill or like rack up huge numbers in games, but like he's going to be playing with a team with that is like basically built around enabling him to play well. I mean, that was Ghosty's role all of last year, is just like play slow, get kills, and enable your teammates to get most of the kills. And so like yeah, I wouldn't say that Joe Deceives was in that position last year. So I guess that's one I would say right off the bat is like I really like the sound of that. Like I like the sound of, I would not be surprised if you told me like yeah, Joe is actually ups his KD game from last year, on the team that's rumored for 100T.
Yeah. And one thing to note, like I said at the beginning, new game. We don't know how it's going to play, how people are going to play in this game. Is there anything you learned last year in before I say that, I know the new season rolls around, everyone gets excited. I want to get my bets in. Like this is my year. I'm going to make a killing this year. But there's not much to go off of at the beginning of a game's lifespan, right? It's cycle, if you would. Is there anything that you learned in MW2 that you're going to apply to this season when it comes to how early you're going to stop betting?
Yeah, I think, I think honestly, the biggest thing that I learned this year is that we don't know what we don't know about the teams. I've pointed to this fact in the past, but like Breaking Point does their prediction contest through every major, a bunch of like really smart people who I think are really smart predicting just who's going to win the game straight up. They don't have to bet, they don't have to like pick, yeah, fit, like they don't have to not pick favorites, huge favorites or something. And like we look at that, and then Breaking Point also tracks like who the underdogs are in each of the games. And it's crazy to look back and see that in Major 1, the underdogs, like Bet365 underdog, just straight up won more games than the favorites did, which is crazy. But like if we won't say that the markets are perfectly efficient in Call of Duty. I don't think that they are. There's just not enough liquidity in these markets for like people to actually be pushing the prices around enough. And there just aren't people that have enough information. But like that is something to keep in mind, is that we don't have enough information. Like I'd say early in the year, whatever you think likely to happen, probably discount it a fair bit and maybe go the other way. Like, yeah, if you had bet underdogs only, just blindly bet every single underdog for all of Major 1 through the Major 1 like in-person event as well in Raleigh, you would have one, made a ton of money, but two, you would have been right more than 50% of the time, which you don't even need to do to make money betting underdogs, which is just, yeah, is really mind blowing to think about. So, like, but like to think about it, like, yeah, a bunch of smart people that make the predictions, they also didn't have to like bet at any specific line. They just said, who's going to win this game, this team or the other team? And they couldn't even do it 50% of the time, a lot of the time in Major 1. So, like, yeah, when I'm thinking about, yeah, when am I going to place my bets? One, I'm probably waiting. I want to gain some information. We talk about gaining informational edges. We just talked about it with PrizePicks, how we can gain informational edges. And I think the edge that you have early in the season is that you know you don't have any information. Like you cannot be certain of anything early in the season. We know how much a one player change on a roster can make, and so most of these teams are swapping two, three, four players. Like if you think that you know what's going to happen, you're like definitely misled. So I think to me, one, I'm going to be very cautious at the beginning of the year, but I would take shots on people that maybe are a little less likely. Maybe general consensus is that this team might not be as good or something. Because yeah, especially on DraftKings where it's just winner take alls to first place, like all I need is London to be a little bit better than people think they are, and I could win a first place in a GPP. Like, and so like, I think that's going to be my attitude going into Major 1 is I'm going to come in with the preconceived notion, which is I don't even want to bet because I don't know what's going on. But then I see something where I see the field saying we're very confident that London is terrible, or we're really confident that Toronto is going to be the best team in the league now because they upgraded from Hixie to Envoy. I'll take the other side of that bet. Like,
Yeah.
not that I think it's really that likely to happen, but I can't imagine that it's less likely to happen than people think it will be. And yeah, that's sort of my mindset.
Yeah, I think I'll have a little fun this season with the underdog betting. If anyone out there is gonna do the same, do it responsibly, of course. If you have the money to play with, do it. But I think I'm gonna play around at the beginning of this year with teams that people aren't expecting, especially on these sites where you can bet your money lines and everything like that. I think there will be value there. It's not gonna be a ton, but I could be wrong because last year I saw some massive lines too. But granted, that would be like FaZe versus London or something like that. But I think, if you're going to have these beefy lines or these beefy odds rather, like it's only going to happen really at the beginning of the season when no one has any idea and they're throwing all their, eggs into the basket of these teams that have been good in the past. Um,
Yeah, I
it,
think I think it. Yeah, you probably made a good point there. That is, if there are huge favorites in Major 1, be cautious. Like there's no such thing as yeah a minus 4,000 favorite in week 2 of the season. Like it's just impossible to know. I was saying to you earlier before we started talking that like if you want to know how crazy Major 1 is, London 3-0'd New York in the first week of the season, and then New York won the first major. And then London was, yeah, probably the worst team the entire rest of the season. But like, if you had watched that game, you would have been like, wow, New York is not doing anything this year, and London might be the real deal. Like, yeah, like Sim's actually playing at a huge, high level right now. This is 2 weeks later, you've been like, what was I thinking? It's just impossible to know. Like, it just, yeah, but like, yeah, I'd say if you watch that game and then London was minus 300 favorites in their next game, any person that is like just wise, not good at Call of Duty, anybody who's wise is banging the other team on that one. Like there's just no way that we've learned enough. If your preconceived notion was that London was bad and then they won one game, your new notion should not be that much different. Like it takes, I think for me in the past, I make like a nice little like rule of thumb, like 5 games to know if a team is legit and 10 games to know, or sorry, 5 games to know if a player's legit, 10 games to know if a team is legit. Like if it's less than that, like anything can happen. So yeah, I'd say these week 2 bets after week 1 information, you don't have much of an informational edge yet.
You have to use your like brain. That just sounds like no shit, Chris. But you can watch all the podcasts in the world, or like look at all the analytics like that are on the internet, whatnot, and make your mind up from there. But at some point, you have to use your brain and just think for a second. Think, because things might seem a little too good to be true, and vice versa. But I promise you, if you take a step back and look at it through a different lens of just your minds and just what could happen, I guarantee like a lot of good could come out of that instead of just following 100% numbers. They do help. I'm not saying they don't, but at the end of the day, use your brain a little bit too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a thought experiment that helps me a lot is to like think of like when I see teams like bad teams beat good teams or something like that, like very like consensus good teams lose to bad teams or whatever. I think like if I had a coin that only came up heads like 20% of the time, how often would it win like in a coin flipping contest, best of 5? How often would it win a best of 7 or something like that? And if you like actually look at those numbers, like not to say that math will always give you that, when you start to see what percentage of the time a coin that comes up 20% heads will come up heads 3 times in a row or like stuff like that, you'll start to realize that like this stuff just happens. Like it just happens sometimes. Like yeah, whatever, 20% is, yeah, 4% of the time it will happen 2 times in a row. Like, and how many games do we play in a season? Like a ton. Like what are the odds that it doesn't happen a couple of times? Like that's the question. Yeah, it's I don't know, that's one of the things I use to just ground myself. Yeah, you see a team smoke another team, you're like, they have to be good now. It's like, but how often would they win even if they had a 20% chance to win? Like they would have to, yeah, 2 out of 10 times, 1 out of every 5 times that team would win.
Yeah.
2 out of 10 is not 0. And like, yeah, some people get those two things mixed up. It's like this team won and I gave them a 0% chance to win, so they must be good. Like that, you probably just gave them the wrong chance to win the game to start.
This is probably very aggressive to say, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's like, hey, you'll make $10 million if you do this thing, but you have a 10% chance you'll die doing it. That 10% is pretty big when you think of it like that. Like
Yeah.
it's not 0. Like it could happen.
You wouldn't do it in that case. But yeah, we make that call a lot of times. We see a team that went into the game like plus 1,000 to win, and then they win, and it's like that was impossible. It's like, no, you said plus 1,000. That's not impossible. Like it's like barely under 10%. Like yeah, it's just it's a very hard thing to just do. Yeah, I mean, you say use your brain, and like I definitely agree. But on the other, like maybe part of using your brain is realizing that your brain is always going to try to trick you. Like we're always looking for like an explanation of why things happen. Like this is sort of philosophical, but I would say like that's a caster's job, is to like to tell people why something happened, and like they have to be able to do it in a sentence. When a team rotates and like they might do 100 little micro plays to make something happen, the caster will say one sentence like Afro gets a huge kill on Slasher or something, and they rotate. But like that was only one tiny thing that happened, and like our brain does the same thing. Like yeah, we watch a full game and then we make one thing and say that was the one thing that made this game happen the way that it did. And it's like it's just impossible. We couldn't possibly grasp the number of micro decisions that each player makes that leads to the outcome. But like yeah, so we need to like try to don't even let ourselves do that. Just stick to the numbers and like yeah, like how this could have just happened. This could just be random. Like London could just be bad. Like even though they 3-0 New York, they could just be bad or whatever.
Yeah, shit happens. All right, so I want to talk about the teams that are not. I don't think any team is 100% confirmed right now. Maybe Atlanta.
Yeah.
Atlanta. I mean, they don't really have to come out and say that they're keeping Simpa, Beasley, and Celium, but they have announced Draza joining the roster. So that's probably a good place to start off. So, from a high level view, Doug, What do you think of Draza taking Slasher's spot? What do you think about the move that they did?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's definitely a strong move. And again, like, it's a perfect chance for us to like use our like analytical brains here. But like, yeah, I mean, the big talk about Atlanta is they've been number one in the regular season every year. They've never finished what worse than top three or something like that. Like yeah. So you could tell me that they replace Slasher with somebody that I've never even heard of or something. And like my bet for them to finish top three, I would still be happy to place it or whatever. Like it's just like, yeah, when you have three people that have done like incredible things every season, like I think this team will no doubt be strong next year. I find it hard to believe that Draza will come in and just they will just be horrible. Like they'll just be the worst team in the league and like or even middling. So yeah, I think Draza for Slasher, like to me, is not like a huge upgrade or downgrade. Like I'm maybe a bit of an upgrade in just like the slaying department. But I think like Slasher brings a lot to the team that is like maybe more intangible or just like that helped enable the other players to do better. I do say like the one thing I had noted here about Atlanta and that I think is probably important from like a fantasy perspective is like we really didn't see much of Simp last year. Simp was very quiet all season long. He had a pretty good season, just not an Abezy level season. And like to me, I've always been like yeah, I've always thought Simp was like probably the best player in the league, and he just had a quiet year. While Atlanta finishes first overall again, and it does what finishes top three or four at every major. He's still just quiet season. So to me, maybe like some of that has to do with like I know Slasher like controls the like he can be a good in-game leader like controls like the strategy a little bit. Maybe we'll just see a shift a little bit away from whatever role Simp was playing in certain maps that made him be quieter than a BZ. Like maybe we'll see him get activated a little more. That's something where like yeah, if we look to the longer path than just last season, we've seen Simp just take over games all like every other game. And this season that wasn't the case. So like if we're looking on the whole, I still think Simp is a takeover player most of the time. So I don't know. That's the one thing I think about Atlanta is that like I would not be surprised to see Simp start to take over games more often again. Split the takeovers of the Beezy, where it seemed like this year it was just the Abezy show for the second half of the season. Every game that Atlanta finished with over a 1 KD was because Abezy had a 1.5 or whatever. So I do think that maybe not even directly because of anything Draza does, but just that like yeah, I think Simp is going to be looking to try to find a different play style this season to help him just like yeah show off that he might be the best player in the league still. He just happens to play with potentially maybe the other best player in the league on his yeah sitting right next to him. So yeah, that is the thing I look for. Less draw. I think Draza will just sort of slot in. He might have. I'd honestly expect him maybe to have worse stats than last year, just because yeah he's playing with even stronger players from a slaying department. So maybe he'll start to look a lot more like Slasher did. But yeah, look to Simp to maybe perform more.
Yeah, I think Draws is a phenomenal player. I think Slash is a phenomenal player. So it's kind of a lateral move for me, but you also lose the voice of your main AR, which was Slasher. I mean, he had to be calling shots on that team. Had to be IGL. They all obviously collaborate when it comes to what plays they're running, but having that strong presence of your main AR can only help your SMGs feel more comfortable and like know that you're watching over them. Not saying that Draza can't do this, but I don't think we've really seen him in that IGL spot just yet. And I think, that role will have to shift over, obviously, to one of the SMGs to kind of take over in that, like, main IGL spot, if you would. But I don't see them dipping at all. I don't see them getting extremely better. I don't see them getting any worse. I think they're going to
Yeah.
be a great team like they always are.
Yeah, I've got them. I think right now, like I saw somebody post about like what are the top, like how would you rank just the rosters that you've seen so far? I think I have them number one still. Like, I think you can make the case for Toronto, but like, and we'll talk about them, but yeah, I still think they're probably going to be the best team this year. And like, yeah, again, that's just my naive brain going, what's happened every single year of the CDL? Oh, FaZe has been the best. Well, what do I think is going to happen this year? Well, I think FaZe is going to be the best. Like, and like, yeah, sometimes you just have to think like that. Ask me after Major 2, then maybe I'll have a good opinion about it. But right now, I'm putting my money on Simp and Abezy.
That's fair. That's fair. You think they're the best team in the league right now with the roster that they best roster right now. I think you're wrong because we're going to talk about Boston right now. There's no bias at all towards them.
Yeah, yeah.
No bias at
What's
all.
that?
Oh no, it's kind of hot in here. I'm just trying to,
Yeah, okay, okay.
sleeves up for Doug. Um, but Boston currently announced, and I'm going to speak as I can on here. Obviously, I'm a breach employee. But we have Slasher, Priesta, and Snoopy all confirmed on the lineup right now. So I don't want to talk too much. I'll obviously give my 2 cents on it, but I really want to, see what you think about these guys. You have two world champions, one that was just last year, and then you have arguably one of the up and coming, futures of the Call of Duty League, 18-year-old Snoopy from Monterrey, Mexico, who, came in last minute last year for champs. And, it was only upside for him, but I think he exceeded a lot of expectations. But, from a high level view, what are you thinking of this trio right now?
Yeah, I think like yeah, my note here says clear step up. Like I think yeah, it's a clear step up from the team last year. Like I think that Boston looks like they're serious about winning this year. I we said it before, and I'll just repeat it because I think that it's like a good descriptor here. It's like Boston has been like no doubt like a strong team the last 2 years, but they've been a dark horse strong team, and this is the first year that I feel like we can really say like yeah, we expect Boston to be strong. They went out and they said, we had a pretty good season last year, like middle of the pack most of the year with like some signs of brilliance. And now we're getting even better. Yeah, we're getting someone who just won champs and we're putting them on fitting him into this roster. Like, I just find it hard to believe that this isn't a step up for Boston. But yeah, to me, I'm very optimistic about the roster. I think, yeah, adding someone off of a team of only 4 players, one of those players finished first in the league, and then another team of 4 players taking one of those players who just finished first overall, winning champs. Like that is that's a recipe for success. So like yeah, I'm very high on Boston. I mean yeah, I'll say I still think Atlanta's probably better, but I think that Boston compared to where they were, like this is a step up. I'd feel pretty confident making that prediction to say like, yeah, if you gave me 50-50 odds on will Boston finish above or below their ranking from last year, I'm saying above, like for sure. Like they went out and they made moves, and like yeah, I can respect that. So yeah, I'm very happy with this roster. I do think it's from like a fantasy perspective, like talking about Snoopy, like I would be slow to just make any assumptions about how well Snoopy will play. Just from yeah, it's just such a small sample size. Like I was very impressed with his play, and yeah, we talked about it before the games when we did our champ special. Like yeah, like this is just a win-win for him, and it was for sure. But like to come in and like week one say, oh, I know how I know his play style, I know what he's gonna be like or whatever, is that you're yeah, it's just too soon. Give him yeah 5 games at least before you know like how a player is even going to fit into a roster. To go back to my rule of thumb from before, so I'm optimistic about this team, but yeah, it's very hard for me to see exactly what Snoopy's going to do because yeah, we haven't seen enough yet. But I'm excited to see it.
I'm going to go back to my roots as well, Doug. I missed 110%. I know you don't believe in it, but I do believe in it, where you just had two guys who were on two of the best teams last year get dropped from those
It's
teams.
true.
They're
It's
both on a revenge tour right now playing together. You have Prisu, who's joining Boston, which, in traditional sports, that is a rivalry in itself, and he's very aware of it. We've all told him.
the double
It's a
yeah.
rival. And then you have Snoopy, whose life changed in a month out of nowhere. He doesn't want to miss this opportunity. He wants to take everything it's worth and really put his all into it, which obviously you should, but his life was changed in that month, and he's not going to let go of it now without showing the world what he's capable of. I think this trio in themselves are going to go above and beyond to do whatever it takes to, be a championship winning team. Again, this is going to sound very biased coming from me, but, if you take a step back and just look at their stories, not even from my voice, just in general, like there's a story there, and it's waiting to be told, and I can't wait to read it.
Yeah. No, you're not biased at all. I think
No.
I do think I didn't really think about the double whammy like revenge factor plus Boston versus New York is just like a great rivalry thing for Priesta. Like I do like that. That's a spicy little like narrative street there to say like, yeah, it's Boston versus New York, and yeah, it's like yeah, Yankees player gets dropped and Boston picks him up, and yeah, now you're got a showdown at Fenway or whatever in his first game back. You know he's hitting a grand slam or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's yeah, so I like that a lot, and yeah, like I do like this sneaky little play by Boston to bring in 2 people that like could go on revenge tours because like we always say in COD like yeah like players always play better against their former teams or whatever, and by adding 2 people that maybe feel like they got slighted by their teams, like who both performed amazingly and couldn't get deals done or whatever, like now it's like yeah what like a quarter of all your games are going to be revenge games, which is awesome. Like
Yeah, it's
you're
great.
going to be, yeah, people are going to get tired of going so 110% all the time. Like,
But if you go 110% for so long, you're able to go down to like 80 or 90 every here and there just to kind of
yeah,
recuperate. But outside of just like them playing well, I think this is great for the scene as well to kind of bring the Boston New York rivalry in. I
yeah,
know it was like New York tried to do it last year, like it didn't really happen, but it kind of happened at some point. They had like the fuck Boston shirts at their major and stuff like that. Like they tried, but now it's here and like it's
yeah.
really cool.
This is definitely going to be like the next chapter in this, yeah, in the rivalry for sure. We've got like something juicy, yeah, that's its own chapter's worth of like, yeah, content.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's move on to one of the LA teams. Again, these are all rumors. Nothing is confirmed besides the players that are obviously confirmed. So everything that Doug and I say when it comes to a fourth or whatnot, it's not confirmed. It's not intel. It's nothing.
Yeah, I don't.
But
I'm
no,
just a fan. I don't know anything.
yeah, no one tells me anything. Well, I don't care enough to even know. I just wait for them to come out so I can be surprised. But LA Thieves. A lot of changes are rumored to be happening there. You just had Octane obviously retire, Envoy go over to Ultra, and now they're kind of stuck thinking, what are they gonna do? So from
Draza to
Andraza,
Atlanta.
yep, Andraza at Atlanta. I don't know how I forgot about that. It's 90 degrees in here. I'm starting to lose my mind. But yeah, what do you think about LAT?
Yeah, so just to be clear, like the rumored roster that was out there is Dan Ghosty and Cammy as the ARs, and then Joe Deceives and Afro as the subs. I think it's like a very solid roster. Like, yeah, you definitely like some strong players that had down years last year in Afro and Cammy for sure, combined with a player that like has a lot of hype around him in Ghosty, and like really not sure what he can do outside of a team like Optic. Like, I mean, obviously people are going to be critical of him because of his like poor stats, where while his team was potentially the best team in Hardpoint, like over the time that he was there. So I think this is like a really good chance for him to prove himself. I'm a big Ghosty fan for sure. So like, and I think like that his underlying stats like tend to like tell some more of the story, and I've tweeted that out in the past. And then Joe, obviously, a guy who we already talked about it on the show, but like yeah, someone who like definitely showed some real signs of being like a star, just playing on a team that wasn't very good, and like can he really do more on this team? I think it's strong on paper, but yeah, it's very unproven. Yeah, a lot of players that have something to prove. It's like for Afro and Cammy, it's like when they came together on Minnesota, I thought they were going to be a really strong team because of the two of them, and so like they didn't really do that. So can they prove that that was just like yeah wasn't on them, or at least that they can step it up this season? Ghosty, yeah, can you win without having Dashy on your team or something like that? I don't know if that's like a real narrative, but like, and then yeah, Joe, like, can he step up, make his year two even stronger than his year one season, where people doubted him, and then nobody doubted him when he made the league because he was looking really good. So what can he do? Yeah, I think it's a little tough from like a fantasy perspective to look at this team because yeah, we don't know with four brand new players. I guess two of them had played on the team together before. Like we don't know how this team is really going to play. It's kind of easy to suggest that Ghosty will probably play the slowest AR role on the team, but yeah, it's hard to know how Afro and Joe will split kills as like a sub duo. I know there's been like talk about how fast Joe can play, so he's really talented, so maybe he should play faster. I don't know. I think it's a little tough of a read. This is definitely a team where I think the general population is maybe a little low on them. Like I think 100 T fans tend to get a little negative when yeah, you're not signing all of like literally the biggest stars or whatever. And like they did have like the most star-studded roster before. So with yeah, I mean especially with Envoy, Kenny, Octane from 2 years ago, and then obviously Draza came in, but like they had this big stars only roster, and so like I think maybe people will be a little too low on them. I think they'll probably be a little better than the general public thinks.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think this is going to be one of the teams that takes a little bit longer to figure things out. But I think once they actually do, I think they're going to be great. I've had the pleasure of knowing Dan and, personally for a while when he was on Boston Breach Academy. And he's a very, very smart, very, very smart kid. And I think from what we've heard that he did for Optic last year, coming in and, played the dirty work role, but was also shot calling and everything like that. I think he could genuinely help any roster he's on. I just think it might take them a little bit to, finally click. But I think the public is a little too low on what they could actually do together.
And you will say that, like, as you said, like, I agree with you that this team might take a little bit longer to, like, put things together. But it is nice to be on a team like 100T where they've shown in the past that they're willing to stick with a roster and see it through. I mean, yeah, 2 years ago, before they won champs, people wanted them to make a move and they didn't. And so, like, I think that bodes well for this team because, yeah, I know there's been some conversation, like, we've seen, like, the teams that are winning champs or, like, finishing top three are teams that stick together through the full season predominantly relative to how many teams do make moves. And like, yeah, I don't see 100T making a move even if they are not doing well, even after Major Two. And I think that's a good like that. That's like a Doug Leby approved move or whatever. Like I would do that.
We
So
gotta
yeah,
get like a stamp that goes up on the screen.
yeah, approved. Like I think that I would, yeah, I wouldn't either. This team has talent. There's no doubt. Like if, yeah. So if it's not working after Major Two, I see 100T as a team, and maybe it's not even me approve as much as predicted. Like I would have said, yep. If you told me they didn't make a move after Major Two, I'd be like, I knew it. Like so, yeah. I think that's good for these guys because it gives them maybe a little bit more like confidence and just like not as much pressure. Like, hey, like we have time to figure this out because like we know, yeah, like Brandon, their GM, and like coaches, they're not going to be trigger happy. Just like we got to make a move instantly if it's not working. So I really like that for them.
I like that too. Okay, so moving on, one team that made a move that benefited, the best team in the league, Boston Breach. That's what people are saying.
I've heard a lot of people saying that.
Everyone just keeps saying it, so like I'm kind of agreeing with them.
It's your job to repeat what the public is saying.
I have to, that's a podcast host. That's what you have to do. Just gotta regurgitate what everyone's saying and say it with confidence, and people will believe you.
Yeah.
All right, so New York subliners obviously dropped Priesta, and the rumors are pointing towards Sib. Not confirmed, nothing like that. That's just the rumors right now. So, what are you thinking about New York making this change after winning champs last year?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there was like definitely some like drama around what actually happened, and like I feel for Priesta for sure, and just like in a situation where yeah, he's probably like the worst statistical performer on the New York team, and then but like they do win, and so it just puts you in a weird negotiating spot. I don't know any. I will say I stay away from like looking at like what he or his family is saying about it. I saw there's like some talk. I don't want to see that stuff, so I purposely don't watch it. So maybe I'm making dumb comments because I don't know the situation at all. I that's not the type of thing I prefer on my Twitter. But like yeah, like he's just in a tough spot, and so like I see what like yeah, I don't know. It's always hard with negotiations after you win because like yeah, you expect to be rewarded for winning, and like you should be, but like yeah, it's not always the case. So I obviously I would have wanted to keep him. Like I do think that like the team is stronger than the sum of its parts. So anytime you can keep a team that's shown to have a really strong sum of its parts, like I want to keep that together. But I do think that like Sib is not a downgrade by any stretch. Sib had an incredible year from a statistical perspective last year on Seattle, despite their like not playing that well. I think it's a lateral move. If maybe a little bit they get a little bit worse. I think again like Sib was 25% of Seattle, and another 25% of Seattle was Pred, and they were still terrible. So it's hard for me to believe that this is a step up for them, maybe a little bit lower. But then again, I said the reason New York is strong is because the sum of their parts were better than each individual, and like I think the coaching staff can get that out of them, and they've shown that in the past to be able to get more out of players as a whole than each of the players brings to the table on their own. And so why not be able to do that with Sib as well? But yeah, I don't see this as like they're clearly stronger than they were before. I think, yeah, you lost a really key piece to a championship winning team, and like you're always going to have some pains because of that.
Yeah, and I think from, wagering angle on it as well, I would treat them the same as you kind of did last year. Personally, like obviously let them warm up and see how they play, but like you said, you feel like it was a lateral move. So if you were looking at it through those optics, no pun intended again, look at me, I'm on a roll. I know I've been practicing for this day. I would look at them from a similar scope, if you would, as last year with Hydra, still kind of carrying majority of the weight and all that stuff. Let's move on to the joke the pun I just made.
Yeah, well,
boom! Look at the segue too. You kidding me?
It's a segue, a pun, a segue transition. Like you just haven't lost it at all. It's good to see that you've been practicing.
I have in the mirror every single day. Optic Texas. So obviously dropped Hook and Ghosty, and rumors are pointing towards Pred at the moment. So Dr. Doug, Optic Texas.
I think, I mean, I think Pred is just, I mean, like obviously, as every single Optic fan would say, like, yeah, but Pred is a really strong player. I find it very hard to believe that they'll be worse by adding Pred to their team. I don't think any team could get worse by adding him. I mean, it does concern me a little bit that, like Seattle, what really couldn't put it together this year. Because yeah, at the end of the day, everyone's 25% of the team, and like even Pred, and like Seattle was really bad considering he was so strong. I mean, you look at a team like New York, where we do say Hydra carries a lot of the load. I think Hydra and Pred are like two of maybe the top four players in the league. And you see for Hydra that leads to championships, and for Pred it's led to. I mean, honestly, it led to a little more last year. This year, pretty poor results. So yeah, I don't know. That's my only concern. I still think that Texas or Optic probably gets stronger because of the play. I think that both Hook and Dan were really good for the team. But yeah, I mean, when you have a chance to bring in someone like Pred and also just like the following that he has and like the hype around the whole move, like I mean, it's kind of a no-brainer for Optic if they're willing to spend the money for it. So like, I'm I'm expecting them to be very strong right out of the gate, and I would expect them to expect to be very strong right out of the gate too. We talk about teams that wouldn't make a move even if they were poor at the beginning of the season. I would not put Optic in that category. If they come out and are bad in the first major, they're making a move probably, and it sort of sucks to say, but for whoever the fourth is that they are going to pick up, I know there's certainly been rumors about it, but like yeah, if they're bad, whoever that fourth player is, because yeah, I don't see them dropping Shotzi, Dashy, or Pred off of their team, but I do think they might make a move. So, but I do think they'll be strong. I expect the much more likely outcome is them to be strong.
It's kind of scary being the fourth to come into that roster, knowing that, like you just said, if a change gets made, it's
Yeah.
gonna be you.
But I'm excited if somebody picked up the phone and said, "Hey, do you want to play with Dashy, Shotzi, and Pred?" I'd be like, "Yes." Like whatever you're paying sounds good. But yeah, it's a double-edged sword for sure. Playing with really strong players. I will say one other note that I saw that I had written down here is like we think about Pred as like this guy who puts up like 1.25s every game. He was just no matter even if Seattle got 0-3 stomped, he was going positive or whatever. And like I would say to be cautious about that going into this next year where he's playing with like players that can put up big KD numbers, which I wouldn't say he was playing with before, regardless of winning or losing. Like yeah, Dashy's always putting up big KD numbers. Shotzi is typically very strong as well. Like I would just like even in the games they win, I just can't imagine a situation where Pred's still going plus 20 every series or whatever. It's just going to be hard. There's just not enough kills to go around. And so, like, that is one dangerous thing. Like, we see players playing on bad teams will always have higher KDs if they're really good because yeah, they're in a lot more situations. Like the easiest time to get a kill is right after your teammate failed to get a kill but got some damage on a player. Like if you think about it from that perspective, and like that's the most common scenario players find themselves in COD is 3v4 scenarios where you need to trade out the death that your team just had. And so if your team is the one that's dying all the time, like Preds is, he's being put in this 3v4 with one player weak scenario all the time. And like that's just the KD, like yeah, that's the KD multiplier basically right there. And so yeah, just I wouldn't be surprised or even like think that Pred's a bust or whatever if he's only dropping 1.1s now. It's going to be harder. There's going to be less of those 3v4 tradable scenarios because he's got talented players on his team just smoking people every single gunfight. He's going to be stuck in a bunch of the opposite scenario, which is like, yeah, his teammate gets an extra kill and then they come back and are trying to avenge him or whatever. So yeah, I just say keep an eye out for that. Like stacking Pred captain on DraftKings on day one, I'd be a little weary that we're not going to see numbers like last year.
Yeah. Yep. Couldn't agree more on that. Yeah, in my opinion, definitely going to be a good team. And then last but definitely not least, a team that upgraded, in my opinion, have always been a good team. But Toronto Ultra dropped Hixie, picked up Envoy. I think Charlie Pixie was a great player. Envoy, I believe, is better. Over time, Hixie will get there, but Envoy's just been doing this for a while, and he's proven that he can win. And yeah, I think it's a great move on their end. But what are you thinking? Obviously, coming from them who were great last year, and now keeping three pieces of the puzzle and just adding in the star on top of the tree.
Yeah, I mean they certainly went with the if we outslay, we'll definitely win mentality here in the off season. Like, yeah, I tend to agree. Like, I mean, I feel like, and maybe I'm just biased or whatever. I feel like I'm always the person to try to stand up and say like the stats don't always matter, or like, yeah, like lower KD on Hicksy isn't the reason. Yeah, look at the outcomes. That Toronto's still winning these games, but even I am having a hard time saying that picking up Envoy is making your team worse. Like, that is just he's one of the most talented players in the league. And when you have a chance to sign him, it's just nothing personal. Like, and like, I hope that that was the situation. It's just like, yeah, nothing personal. Just, yeah, we want to try to make an upgrade here. And so, yeah, I do think that if any team is better than FaZe, I would expect it to be Toronto. I think, yeah, you add a player who wasn't even on a down year or anything, just a really great player in Envoy, and able to put him in with a roster that's clearly extremely talented. Found a ton of success last year. I mean, it's important, and I sort of weird to think about, but like when Toronto picked up Hicksy, they dropped Standy, and even then they were what, they finished second at Major One or something like that. Like, it's not like they were bad and then Hicksy slotted in and they were finally good. Like, they were pretty good to great, and then they became like maybe the best team for a little while in the middle of the year once they picked up Hicksy. So like, to then say, oh yeah, but now they have envoys, that's scary for the rest of the league, I think. I do expect Toronto to be like, yeah, a top two team. I think they'll be expecting to be a top two team as well. I think there are three teams that will expect to be top two teams this year in Optic, Toronto, and Atlanta. It remains to be seen who will be the odd one out, but I wouldn't be surprised to find that all three of those teams expect to be a top two team after Major One. They went out and did their due diligence in the offseason to say, yeah, we were a top four team this year, and we're going to be top two next year.
I think it's worth mentioning before we wrap that vibes in the locker room are massive to me. In Toronto, they were all good friends, it seemed on the surface, really got along with one another, had fun in their content, all that stuff. And I think Envoy is just going to slot right into that as well, knowing who he is. He's a true professional and knows what it takes to, grow and to win and, have fun in the process. So I think, with that team, I don't think anything is lost when it comes to the vibe department, if you would.
Yeah,
So I think they're gonna, continue to be great, but not as great as Boston Breach. That's what everyone. I just got a text. Someone said that, so I just repeated it for them.
yeah, no,
But yeah, no,
understandable.
I think they'll be good. Okay, so all the other teams are not confirmed yet. We don't really know what's going on with them. We still have a while until the season starts, so you should probably expect to start seeing, more than just rumors coming out around specific teams. I think that was the last one. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
But is there any final words of encouragement, of wisdom, anything you have, Doug, before we land this?
No, I think I made my points clear here. I think, yeah, it's the beginning of the season from a betting perspective is about being cautious, looking to take your shots. I think some of the stuff that we learned last year will be helpful, but yeah, in terms of especially prize picks, you got to be cautious early. Like, yeah, just think about all the rosters in the past that have made one person changes and been completely different in their dynamics or how good they are, to then say that every team is making at least one change this offseason. To think that you will know exactly how a team will play or a player will play or how good one team will be over another in game one is just crazy. And so, yeah, pick your spots based on maybe the lack of you knowing what you don't know, where other people don't know what they don't know. If you know that you can't possibly know how good Toronto is going to be exactly, maybe you can find a good spot to bet Toronto or something. But don't, if you were to write down your reason for making bets and it's because you know that Toronto is going to be good over another team or something like that, stop yourself. Say, wait, what do I know about roster moves and how much impact they have? Everybody's 25% of the pie. So yeah, it's that's my final word of warning. And I just wanted to say shout out to you, Chris, because yeah, your transitions have been excellent today. Your bias towards Boston has been almost impossible to notice. I think you really just, yeah, you've come absolutely correct this offseason. They say like we want our players to be working hard in the offseason to become better, and I feel like you've taken that to heart as well.
Doug, I feel like you have too. You sent me the video the other day where you're doing curls with your microphone. Like, that's what I love to see, man. We got to give the people a good show. You got to stay sharp. And, I'm nothing without you on the show. You're the brains behind it. I'm the guy with the funny accent that somehow learns how to transition things and be biased to where he's from.
Hey, a wise man once said, some people want it and some people only kind of want it, and we both want it.
Want it. Love that. All right. Well, what I want to do is put the AC on and end this episode because it's extremely hot in here. But thank you, everyone, for listening to this episode of Quick Six Fantasy. I am Crispy. This is Dr. Doug. We will definitely be back when more information comes out. But until then, we'll see you later.